Hello and welcome to In The Know. I'm your host, David Miners. Today, we're pleased to have the Premier and the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Paula Cox. Minister and Premier, it's wonderful to have you here today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, we have a lot of things to discuss, so we're just going to jump right in. Is that okay? Wonderful. Premier, earlier this week, sadly, we witnessed another murder. This time it was 24-year-old Mr. Lorenzo Seville, who was gunned down. We've heard from the governor, Mr. Ferguson, and the National Security Minister, Mr. Parent-Chief, on the matter. So my question to you is, what are your thoughts on the latest incident, and what assurances can you offer the public, regarding what government is doing to address the continued issues of gang and gun violence?
I think clearly it was horrific, tragic, whenever there's a loss of life. And I think especially in these circumstances, it seemed particularly horrible in terms of the motivation and how somebody was shot. But what is government doing? What we're continuing to do is to provide the necessary support to the Bermuda Police Service, to regularly liaise with the governor, and also to use the framework of the National Security Council. Clearly, what is most important is that the community is prepared to work together. And what I am very pleased about is the fact that the community has recoiled. They've collectively been disgusted, and as a result, they are feeding information to the police service. The government is certainly supportive of all actions that the Bermuda Police Service take to increase the enforcement action and to increase the visibility. That is something that runs very passionately from the government point of view. We are prepared to do whatever it takes so that the police have the necessary resources in terms of making sure that they can do the job that they are tasked to do. While they're accountable to the governor, the only way the relationship can work is if there is a relationship of confidence between the community, the government, and the authorities represented by the Bermuda Police Service. Now, that is only one part of the puzzle. The other part of the puzzle is, what about our social state in terms of social policy? The government has committed, and you'll recall that in the throne speech last year, we committed to the issue of an inter-gang task force with the Ministerial Council. That is underway, and ministers are meeting regularly. There is a committee, and it's headed and chaired by the minister who has responsibility for youth, families, and sports, the Honorable Glenn Blakeney. Because while you can look at it from one aspect, which is enforcement, you also have to be equally focused on prevention. And that means making sure that the natural associations and collaboration takes place at the ground level, cross-government. And that means education, that means your social services, that means your court services, that means also in terms of the proper linkages between the parole board, court services, the Bermuda Police Service. Those are the issues that we are focused on, because our view is the fact that we've got to make sure we save and provide help. But one of our functions has to be also to make sure that the people whom we represent feel a sense of safety. They can only feel a sense of safety if they know and take confidence that action is being taken by the proper agencies, and that the government is willing, ready, and able to support those agencies in carrying out their functions. And that we are unequivocally supportive of.
Wonderful. Premier, I'd like to move into another area that's dominating local and global headlines, of course, which is economics and the economic downturn. No country seems to be immune. Greece, Italy, Spain, France, Germany, even the United States have all had their credit ratings lowered. All of these countries have struggled in the last 4 years to grapple with the economic meltdown. Now, here at home, we've been affected in several ways, of course, and there's been clamor of negative noise from certain sectors that say, one, that there's no global recession, and two, government has done nothing to address those challenges. So, Premier, my questions to you are actually, one, what would you say to those critics? And then two, what is your vision of a dynamic, thriving economy that you think and what are those ingredients that we need, to get us back on that track?
I think clearly, take it as read. Everybody knows there's been an economic downturn from a global point of view. Next, what are we doing in Bermuda? Bermuda's not been immune from that. I mean, we've been treated to a steady diet of people who have been made redundant. We recognize that, and we also recognize that we have a responsibility to provide a means of help to those who have been left vulnerable. And that means that we've got to make sure that the minister that has responsibility for financial assistance has the ability to help those when people are down. They need to know that there is a safe haven. We've also taken action with regard to national pension hardship regulations. Not only did we do it for the private sector, but also for the public sector pension funds. So people who need a lifeline on a temporary basis have the ability to draw on their pension funds for some narrowly prescribed purposes. And you'd be surprised at the number of people who have done that, and I get almost on a weekly basis a number of inquiries where people are asking what do they need to do, who do they need to go. Now, to those who say that their government has done nothing, I think you also have to appreciate that just as in the US, right now there's going to be always a lot of sound and fury, but the facts are that the government has taken action. One, we sought to preserve jobs with even the payroll tax concessions. We also sought with regard to some of the customs duty harmonization. Yes. What we want to do is preserve jobs. We may have lost 4 or some thousand, but we've saved 36,000. And it's as a result of the government being prepared to inject money into the economy and also reduce its intake. What do I mean by reduce its intake? In other words, if we didn't give concessions to the retail sector, if we didn't give concessions to the EEZ, if we didn't give concessions to the hotel sector, we certainly would have a greater revenue base. But we felt that the pain to our public finances was worth it so that you could help to provide a source of assistance to businesses and people at a time when they need it. And that's what we're going to continue to do where we see the need. It's not going to be a bottomless pit of giveaways because no government's finances can be sustainable in the long term by just giving money away. But we saw the need to provide that economic support for the time being, and that's continuing for the moment. What do I see in terms of the future, and how do I feel about the future in terms of confidence? I think what's important to note, and I think you have to look at it both on the individual level and also at the government level. In other words, micro and macro. Bermudians are strong. They're also resilient, and they wish to do all that they can. What do I mean by that? For most of the morning today, I was in St. George's in the East End. I went and visited about 4 small businesses. One was a shoe store, A to Z. One was the Cave. One was the new Japanese place that is sushi and Chinese food. And then there's another which is also doing lingerie and accessories. And in fact, I made a couple of purchases. And what I like is that these 3 young businesses, about 3 to 4 months old, they're staffed and operated by young people who started a business during this economic downturn. Because even though it's tough, they have hope, and they're also seeking to change the paradigm. And what I like is they're collaborating together. If you go into a bar, if you exclude the restaurant, the 3 young businesses that I went to, they are each cross-marketing the other. So you can go in the shoe store, and I spent some time in the shoe store where there were 2 tourists, a partner, male and female, and the gentleman was saying that the price of shoes he could buy for his girlfriend 6 pairs for a pair that he saw closer to town. And it was interesting, they were having fun. And at the end, he had 3 pairs of shoes. They were these, those platforms. I thought they looked sexy, but I couldn't dare buy them. I don't know if I could have walked in them. But what I'm saying is they were cross-marketing. And if you spent $75 in any of those 3 stores, you got your name put in the hat for a potential hotel stay or restaurant stay. And I say that when I say the micro. It's not to underestimate the pain that many people are feeling who have lost jobs, but the fact that we've got to also realize that no recession lasts forever, and what we have to do, just as a government level, what we've got to do is prepare people for the future and when the economy turns around. That means that you've got to provide development and training opportunities. We had just recently the minister whose responsibility for economy, trade, and industry with regard to the drywallers. You have the young people and not so young who are doing the personal care. You have the monies that are put aside in terms of about $500,000 for retraining in terms of accountancy at the college. The government is providing the opportunities, and even more so at the macro level. What do we have to do? What we've got to do is create a platform for business. That means we've got to create an environment in which businesses feel welcomed in Bermuda, but also we've got to provide an enabling regulatory framework so businesses feel welcome in Bermuda. And it means that we've got to go out and drum up the business. That's why I go to New York to the C3 Summit. That's why the Minister of Business Development and Tourism goes looking and talking about hotels and our new tourism product and a new tourism campaign. And those are the reasons why we even are looking at diversification of the economy in terms of geographic diversification. You've got to fish where the fish are, and you've got to provide the opportunity for greater economic activity so that jobs are created. The jobs won't be created by the government, but they certainly have to, we as a government have to help cause people to come to Bermuda. And that's going to be by our regulatory framework, that's going to be by our reputation, and that's also going to be about looking at and having a path and a plan as to how we're going to grow those jobs. So for those who say that nothing's been done, I'd say of course not. That would be a false statement. What this government has taken a position on, and a decided and determined position on, is that we're going to invest in Bermudians. We're going to invest in providing the necessary revenue and also the generating income, but also in terms of building. And that's what we've spent the money on, so that we have an infrastructure which will be attractive to those who wish to come to Bermuda, whether in terms of schools, whether in terms of airport runways, whether in terms of affordable housing. Those are the things that are tangibles and that are not just for the here and now, but they're for future. So it's investment. And that's what this government is doing. And yet we're not just saying we're investing and that's it. We're also going out to get the business. We're going where the fish are, and we're telling the Bermuda story, and we're encouraging people to choose Bermuda as their domicile. And we're not just saying words. Words mean nothing. What are we doing as action? Job makers. And then you have, that's under my remit, then you have the Minister for National Security, who has responsibility for border control and visas. He's saying if you have a visa that is a visa that has in good standing from the US, the UK, London, UK and the US, as well as Canada, then you can come to Bermuda without having unnecessary red tape by us. We're saying that we want the business, we want credible people to come here, and we're prepared to do the necessary so there's less impediment for people to want to do business. Similarly, from a customs point of view, we took the position that people who have these mega yachts, which are worth a lot of money, we're no longer going to double tax you in terms of customs duty. It's a value to us and to Bermuda. When you come to Bermuda, you park those yachts, and if you take them out and bring them back, we're not going to say we want a double whammy. So we're changing the paradigm, and we're being less protectionist about our policies and freeing up. That's why we say, even with the 60-40, we know that some of these small and young entrepreneurs, and even not so young entrepreneurs, what do they need? We have a very small economy, and they need access to capital. So we need to provide them with access to capital. And if the government isn't going to fund it, then it certainly needs to make sure that there is a framework so others, as private sector developers and potential partners for these entrepreneurs, can help provide access to capital. What does that do? You have businesses that grow, that they employ people. That is economic activity being generated. That is helping our GDP numbers. That is people going out who have money in their pockets, who are prepared to buy some clothes, who are prepared to spend some money on some perfume, who are prepared to go into a restaurant, who are prepared to do the necessary, take their family out and enjoy the beauty that Bermuda has. But they have to feel that they can afford it. They can only afford it if there is economic activity and they're getting money in their pocket to take care and feed their family and also interact and enjoy their family. That's what our job is. So for those who want to say, let's close down Bermuda, do nothing, sit and just hope we ride out the recession by just slavishly and ruthlessly cutting spending, that is the worst thing you could do. It propels your country into a double recession and possibly a depression. Not wise at all.
Okay. I want to switch gears a little bit. You talked briefly about attending overseas meetings and summits, of course, over the last year to advance Bermuda's interests. Of course, was the RIMS event, which was in Philadelphia, the FedEx Global Women's Forum, and of course, the C3 that you just came from. So, somewhat of a twofold question. Can you impress upon us again the importance of advancing Bermuda's business interests overseas, and can you share some insight about the aims of the C3, as well as your personal thoughts about sharing the stage with President Bill Clinton at the actual summit?
President Clinton is still a very charismatic man, and he has just recently this week with the Clinton Global Initiative, he's been busy. He's had, because this is the week where the UN, all the heads of delegations, the prime ministers, the presidents from all over the world have been in New York. So it's been a very busy time. And he had both Romney and President Obama on the stage this week. I'm told President Obama blew it out of the water. But President Clinton is determined to support his party and do whatever is required to go out there and not touch the trees and make sure he flies everywhere to help support his party. I admire that loyalty, I admire that patriotism, and also I think that he is an orator who has charisma, and certainly as in the role of moderator and interviewer, he had the audience in the palm of his hand. And as his chief of staff said to me afterwards, he said that our problem is that he never knows when to keep quiet. But once he gets turned on, he's turned on. And he really, you can see he really likes to engage. What was important was that he saw the value. And what he said to the organizers, not in my presence, but said about me, was that he thought this was a first-class initiative for Bermuda, and he was impressed with the boldness and the vision of recognizing that this was worthy. In terms of Bermuda and C3, C3 stands for collaboration, community, and commerce. And what it is recognizing that that whole Middle East region is a region that has tremendous revenue generating potential for Bermuda. We have something that they are interested in. We are strategically positioned. It's like a pivot. You can pivot from Bermuda to the US, you can pivot to the UK. And what is most important, people who have a lot of money get a lot of money by being prudent. So what they want is a sound regulatory framework, a place where they can trust in the credibility and the integrity of the jurisdiction. And what you must do is get their attention, then show you are sincere in fostering and furthering a relationship. And that is what we're doing. In another week, I'm off to Qatar. I will do the necessary. The Prime Minister has given me a personal invitation. Those don't come easy. And it will be certainly a whirlwind time. But my job is to remember to cement the relationship, because it isn't like Rome isn't built in a day. It isn't one C3 summit. It isn't one trip to London. It isn't one TIA being signed that makes it all happen. But it is the accumulation and the cluster effect which is getting their attention, because they see that we are serious. And that is what I'm going to build on, because if I get them to invest in Bermuda, it helps Bermudians. It helps Bermuda's economy. It generates economic activity. It generates income generating potential, and it provides jobs. And that is my single-minded focus: growing the economy and getting our people back to work.
Okay. Premier, staying on the topic of our overseas presence, recently the UK Prime Minister David Cameron made a cabinet shuffle and included a change in our overseas territory minister. The new minister, I believe his name is Mark Simmons, I'm sorry, I apologize for that, made some fairly positive comments about Bermuda and how the island is being perceived in the US thanks to the current presidential campaign and Mr. Romney's business interests in Bermuda. And I want to quote him. He said, and I quote, "The UK will continue to support the efforts of Bermuda's government to counter the false impression that Bermuda is a tax haven. I anticipate that you will formally meet him in October at the Overseas Territories Consultative Conference to discuss Bermuda's interests, of course. Now, however, in advance of that, what are your thoughts on this declaration of support from the UK?"
I think that he is following through with our request. I indicated that they threw us under the bus, a former UK government, when it was the whole issue of the OECD whitelist. And I have taken every opportunity, both to this governor and the prior governor, as well as to the prior minister with responsibility for overseas territories. I said, we are an overseas territory, we're a dependent territory, we're a colony, whichever way you want to slice it. You're responsible, apparently, for overseas and external affairs, and you have a responsibility to take some ownership in dealing with the US and the EU. I'll do my part. We have an entrustment, and I have been aggressive, and the government has been aggressive about seeking to have tax information exchange agreements signed. We've been aggressive about making sure we have a proper regulatory environment, but I don't expect the administering power, i.e. the UK, to remain mute or silent when Bermuda's interests are being prejudiced, and they have a responsibility. If not, then they serve no purpose.
Okay. Premier, in a few weeks, of course, you'll be presented with an International Women's Foundation Women Who Make a Difference Award for your trailblazing leadership in both private and the public sector. Of course, congratulations again. This is considered a very prestigious award, so can you tell us a little bit about the IWF, your efforts to get a chapter created in Bermuda, and your thoughts about being a recipient of course, this prestigious award?
I'm flattered. I'm honored. I believe the International Women's Forum is an important networking organization. I've been to a number of the conferences. Obviously, this is not a government expense, but a personally paid trip. And I was invited just prior to becoming the party leader of the Progressive Labour Party in October 2010 in Montreal by the then president of the IWF International, and that was now Minister Alison Maynard Gibson of the Bahamas. She thought that it was an organization that it was worthy of consideration. She was keen to see Bermuda become a member while she was the president. I went and was an observer, and I was impressed. I think they are talking about issues which affect the world, and also you have the opportunity to network with thousands of women who are in every aspect of life, from politics to entrepreneurs to bankers to in airline companies to aircraft building companies to space to every possible area of the world. And some of them are obviously just being part of that organization could cause threat, and because they are maybe in the Middle East and other areas. But it is extraordinary to have that opportunity to network and to have mentorship Because when you're the leader, there aren't many people you can go to for advice.
Yes.
You go to past leaders, you have friends, but it's a different position being a leader because you have responsibility and are ultimately accountable and responsible. And you want to sometimes be able to test ideas, and it's good to have a safe haven to test those ideas.
Wonderful. Now, we don't have much time left, so I wanted to make sure that we got this really important question. Now, of course, being the Premier, you're very busy, you have an awesome responsibility. Can you share with us your views about government's progress since becoming Premier? And finally, what gives you hope about our country, Bermuda?
I think if time is at a premium, what's most important is to say that what gives me hope are the people of Bermuda. The people of Bermuda are wonderful, even when they are annoyed, irritated, and disappointed. They have that hardiness about them, and they also have that caring, and they are also informal. They'll say Paula, or they will talk about they'll talk about anything and everything. Yes. And what my job is as the country's Premier is to be the mother of the country insofar as I can. In terms of what we've done, I think what we've done has been mirrored in the efforts of the ministers. You have a national tourism plan, you have a national infrastructure plan that is being finalized. You have people who are committed to do the best for Bermuda and Bermudians and to stand strong for Bermuda and Bermudians. And not just in good times, but more importantly, you see the heart in hard times. And that is what gives me pleasure as the leader of the country, and that is also what gives me a sense of hope. I have confidence, and I also know that we have survived this economic recession. It won't last forever, but we also have a path to progress and for the recovery, and that's what we're working on now.
Okay. I do have maybe about 45 seconds left, so I want to just throw in one more question if I can. When it boils down to your heart, and I know that you have a love for the community and seniors, is there anything that you can see yourself doing in relates to the arts community? Can you share the importance of supporting our local artists?
Our artists, and I think artists go beyond just painters. I think it's our local design community. Yes. They need support. The degree of support is by giving them exposure and also providing them with an opportunity to get funding and support. Those are the areas, because that is part of our culture, who we are, and they shouldn't have to leave Bermuda to get recognition. That's why I was involved in having the design showcase where we showcase some of our fashion designers. That's why I took such pride in being the distinguished patron for St. Paul's recent mustard seed exhibition. And I invested. I didn't invest a lot, but I did buy a piece because I believe we've got to invest in Bermuda, invest in Bermudians, and we've got to stand strong for Bermudians.
Thank you very much, Madam Premier, for your time and your energy. I really appreciate you being here, so thank you once again.
Thank you.
That's it for this edition of In the Know. I'm your host, David Miners. We'll see you next time.